On October 23rd, 2077, the world ended in a 2-hour war. Those that could sought out the protection of vaults, and those that couldn't suffered through the depredations of their fellow survivors, and those of a transforming ecosystem. Yet, mankind did not end so easily. Even in the shadows of mushroom clouds, they struggled to rebuild, constructing ramshackle settlements with scavenged parts from the old world. And as they rebuilt, they looked out to the wastes, to new horizons, wondering if others had survived. And as they grew in strength, caravans of explorers and traders sallied forth into the great unknown, building a network of trade across Southern California. This network, the arteries of an emergent civilization, found themselves under regular attack, beset by raiders and mutated life forms, whose numbers grew into a scourge that threatened to strangle and isolate these settlements. Caravans were exterminated, and those that made it through left a trail of corpses in their wake. A situation that proved untenable. As such, a caravan master by the name of Harold, who worked out of the hub, organized an expedition to find the source of this mutant threat and bring about its end. They ventured far and wide, deep into the depths of the Central California desert. There they came upon a pre-war facility, Mariposa Military Base. Upon entry, they were set upon by hordes of mutant abominations and pre-war security bots. One by one, their expedition was whittled down until only Harold and a Richard Gray remained. Within the depths of this facility, they discovered great vats of a glowing green fluid. Believing this to be the source of the mutant scourge, they set to work planting bombs to destroy the vats. When an old crane came crashing down, whether this was some pre-war security measure or just plain bad luck, Gray and Harold were separated. Sometime later, Harold would emerge, something of a changed figure, but that is a story for another day. Gray, meanwhile, had fallen into the green slime, floated in it for how long is anyone's guess, awakening as he nearly drowned just in time to pull himself free from this chemical cocktail. He still lived, though his body and mind were in a state of flux. He struggled to move, his body racked with pain, as if his very bones were being dissolved and his body was being reduced to webs of flesh. Whatever he had been before, the thing that emerged from the vat was no longer human. His flesh was porous, and tendril-like appendages lashed out at rodents and the things that skittered, consuming them in both body and mind. And though revolting in flesh, his mind had ascended to new heights, effortlessly working through contradictions of perception, and even demonstrating some level of psionic ability. He found himself increasingly curious to the potential of the green stuff, and so began experimenting, first on the critters of the wastes, those that had sought to build their nest within the facility. He was simply curious what would emerge. But soon these experiments lost their novelty. Despite his limited understanding of the mutagenic property within the vats, he began to experiment upon himself. With targeted injections, he found he could integrate himself into the base's computer network, and there his mind feasted upon the pre-war research. He learned of other facilities producing the forced evolutionary virus, his engine of creation. Engorged upon this information, he dreamed of a unity in which the differences that had caused so much destruction were no more. A world united under the Master, where a new and better people would erase the weaknesses of humanity, breaking the cycle of destruction and building a more perfect world. Over the coming days and months, he experimented on those wastelanders foolish enough to enter his lair. With each attempt, he sought out the perfect concoction, but all ended in failure. Some of mind, and some of the body. It wouldn't be until January of 2103 that Gray isolated radiation as the key variable in determining a human's capacity for transformation. Later that same year, he would produce the first of what he called super mutants, a being superior in strength and body of man. And in his excitement, or perhaps in his haste, Gray consumed this new creation, adding its consciousness to his own. In so doing, Richard Gray effectively ceased to be. In his place, a newborn hive mind, the Master. Over the next 30 years, this Master worked on acquiring subjects, first from those who entered the facility willingly, but as his subjects grew in number, they began to raid caravans and small nearby settlements. During this time, the Master standardized his process of creation, his horde of mutants growing, and with their increase, the Master's audacity and boldness of action. He was aided by the ignorance of the wastes. Many were willing to believe that these attacks were nothing more than the work of gangs or the fabled Deathclaws. All too caught up in their own lives, they missed the warning of his new emerging threat. And in their ignorance, he built his strength. Within the ruined depths of a pre-war city, his scouts captured a band of humans. A cult led by a man named Morpheus, a figure who, for much of their life, had been nothing more than a petty raider. But instead of adding this human to his growing army, the Master had other plans. For while he worked in the shadows, Morpheus and his cult would work in the light. Reforged into the Master's heralds, they were to be the face of his unity, promising the downtrodden of the world a chance for salvation. And as these heralds spread the Master's word, his mutant scouts came upon a caravan of vault dwellers. Their pristine, untainted genetics had long been sought, but that was not all they offered the Unity before their conversion. They provided the Master with the location of their vault, a sprawling bunker complex built before the bombs fell, designed to shelter and preserve humanity through the nuclear holocaust. The Master left Mariposa in the hands of a trusted lieutenant, and alongside a number of super mutants, traveled across the wastes to a broken city, a boneyard of the old world, and there beneath a dark-bricked cathedral, the Master built his new lair. Stretching out across the vault, his tendrils and flesh fusing with the Overseer's control station. He integrated himself within the vault's network of computers and there applied the knowledge of the old world, using it to supply his followers with tools of life and conquest. The vault's forges, its industrial engines roared to life, building advanced energy weapons and producing the first vehicles since the Great War. Large steam-powered trucks. Its presses pumped out medical supplies and its recyclers brought forth regular, reliable access to food and water. Through the residents of this vault, he produced a new, superior grain of super mutant. His nightkin, individuals who maintained their intelligence through the conversion process. Individuals who would lead the Master's army, blessed with the most advanced technology and armor his Unity could provide. All the while, The cathedral above was restored, made into the home of his cultists. Morpheus reorganized his followers, building a hierarchical clerical structure, with power being built up into himself and the other 12 high priests. Together they worked out the tenets of their new faith, that the Great War was a purification, wiping away the old world and ushering in the new. That humans, by their very nature, were broken, and that they were spiteful things, violent, and in their fragmentation they perpetuated evil and greed, that only through the acceptance of the holy flame could the world be reborn, could people be united beneath a single banner regardless of their race, gender, or any other trait, and that ultimately those who oppose the unity must be ended permanently. Well, they agreed on these central tenets. The means and methods of recruitment and induction into the faith differed. Some espoused the belief that only through pain and suffering could moral progress be made. Others found a more pragmatic approach, believing in service, working towards the healing of the land, and working for the benefit of future generations. To this end, the newly christened Children of the Cathedral was born. Many of their faithful agents were dispatched across the waste in order to establish a network of hospitals. There they preached their message of hope and offered to the people in their disparate cities some of the best medical care that could be found, often providing their service at a cost far cheaper than any local competitor. In truth, their service was greater than mere recruitment or medical care, or even propagandistic victories. They were the distant eyes and ears of their master. It was their intelligence combined with records obtained in the vault that guided the Unity's plans of conquest. His children waged a propaganda war against the followers of the Apocalypse, a group that in many ways mirrored the children's own ideology, but who held to the technology and learning of the old world. The Master's armies marched, first against the city of Bakersfield, seeking the vault beneath this ruined city. There, they engaged in a prolonged battle against the city's ghoulish inhabitants, only to learn that these ghouls were the corrupted remnants of the vault's population. No longer seeing the battle as being beneficial to his plans, a ceasefire was offered. Yet the Master did not trust these ghouls, and so a garrison was deployed to oversee the settlement's water supply and ensure the city was kept in line. In spite of this failure, his army marched on, all according to the will of the Master, who believed that despite their losses, soon natural-born mutants would replenish their numbers, and who had established a meticulous plan to conquer these wastes in 500 days, and ultimately bring California beneath his banner and usher in his much-promised unity. This, however, was not to be, as a figure who would come to be known in local legends as the Vault Dweller came into conflict with the Master. They themselves were motivated to protect their home and their people. As such, this Dweller infiltrated the Master's lair on March 3rd of 2162, and shortly thereafter, the Master was dead. Some tales speak of the Master being made to realize the flaw in his creations, others that the Dweller avoided direct confrontation and destroyed the Master with a nuclear device already present within the vault. Regardless, the Master was destroyed, consumed by an atomic fire that obliterated the vault and the cathedral above. The Unity, left reeling from this loss, halted in its tracks, its armies dug in, awaiting what would happen next, as the lieutenant at Mariposa continued to produce mutants for a time, before they too would come under assault by this Vault Dweller. Supported by a cadre of Brotherhood Knights, the facility was reduced to rubble, burying beneath the desert vast vats of FEV. With their master dead, his vats of creation no more, the Unity fractured, various bands breaking across the wastes. Some headed east, others north, driven to follow in their master's footsteps and carve out an empire of their own. Their names becoming a curse in the wastes: Gamoran, Attis, Tabitha. Others refused to accept that their master had failed, refused to adapt to their new circumstances, and they would continue to plague the nascent New California Republic for years to come. Their continued attacks, breeding a general hatred towards all super mutants. But for some, they found unity, not through the means of the master, but in the spirit of cooperation. After a period of conflict, these few found that working hand in hand with humanity and with ghouls that they could find some measure of peace. And what of the children? With the death of their master, they abandoned their hospitals, retreating across the waste following in the footsteps of his army. Yet, as the years wore on, and the plans of Unity proved no closer to completion, one by one, many gave up hope, as it was all too much to bear.